Now then, Ukrainians in Kyiv endured another night of Russian attacks. At least 18 people killed, including 12 in the capital, Russia's main target, of course. Authorities say it's exposed widening gaps in Ukraine's air defences. Let's bring in our military analyst, Rob Clark. What's your interpretation of this? Because we've seen other massive strikes and attempted strikes across Ukraine. I think the thing that maybe strikes me is that there's a kind of shift in the number of missiles being used rather than drones. Would that be fair?
Yeah, we can see the last sort of few weeks, a lot more missiles, cruise and ballistic missiles have been used. Ordinarily, Russia tries to probe, particularly Kyiv and some of the northern cities and towns, the urban areas, with a lot of drones, the first-person view drones and a lot more destructive drones. Now they're really starting to ratchet up and try to take advantage, I think, of the... we speak about the gaps in Ukraine's air defences. They are still very layered, very integrated, very well established. But because of the amount of, particularly the interceptors for the Patriots that have been diverted in recent months, that would have been gone or would have gone to European allies to go to Ukraine or to Ukraine directly, have gone to the Middle East and Middle Eastern allies because of the conflict with Iran. So I think we can see that now, that backlog now catching up with Ukraine. And I think Russia are trying to press that advantage.
So this isn't so much the US pulling interceptors out of Ukraine. It's more the fact that the resupply isn't there to ensure that they're kind of as full efficacy as possible. Yeah,
it's a bit of both, to be fair.
Okay.
Some of the interceptors and some of the missiles that were shoehorned for Ukraine at the beginning of the year, for instance, because these are like 6 months, 9 month delivery timescales, and depending on when, for example, Congress release financial aid to release the contract order. So it's months in the making. And then when the Iran conflict really kicked off by sort of March into April, then they started diverting what were going to be going to Ukraine or European allies straight to the Middle East. So it's a bit of both.
And then up in the Arctic, we're seeing a kind of a similar pattern of behaviour here, haven't we, of Russian forces effectively probing the mettle of NATO and its operations.
Yeah, I'd say Europe and the international sort of alliance more broadly are allowing Russia that freedom of manoeuvre now to really test both Ukraine in the battle space and now, as we can see, up in the Arctic and just off Norway's waters, with the F-35s, the British jets having to intercept and sort of like escort out of the area. Russian maritime aircraft trying to not only increase their surveillance of the British fleet there, or the NATO fleet that's heavily dominated by the Royal Navy, but also, again, the increased mapping of undersea cables and just really trying to test those responses. What are the response times? What are the actual responses? How will the UK respond to this? And, that's going to be, I think the UK fleet are there for another sort of 6 to 7 weeks. So I think we can see a lot more of this action, over the coming days ahead.
Allowing is a really interesting word.
The what, sorry?
You said allowing, that kind of NATO's allowing this to happen.
Yeah, I think because there are action like this that we saw last week that's come to light this morning, there's very little set sort of routine and countermeasures to, one, to stop it in the first place, but two, to actually stop it happening again. And it comes down to deterrence. We've scaled back our Royal Navy fleet over the last few years. This has obviously been well publicised over the last few weeks. And I think Russia is trying to seek that advantage. And so far, in my opinion, we're not doing enough to really push back against that.
Rob, really good to see you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.